right, and welcome to Virtualize Everything. So I know I said we were going to be doing a lot of Kubernetes content, and I have some exciting news. I've actually managed to procure a couple of Raspberry Pi 3s. Well, I think there's one 3 and two 4s that I managed to actually get shipped down to me from the Freedom House. So that's really exciting. I'll be able to do something with them. I got to find some more stuff that my buddy that shipped me my stuff from my Freedom House couldn't find. Anyways, that's an upcoming project. Today I noticed that one of our older videos might have some commands that don't work anymore. So I thought it was time to remake this video. So today we're going to be installing LXC, or LXD rather, on an Ubuntu image, on the newest version of Ubuntu actually, of 22.04. So it's here in March 31st of 2003 to give a date stamp if you find this video later on, and we're going to be installing LXC, setting up a default container init or image init. So basically what that means is we're going to run through default options except for maybe LVM and deploy a container for the first time. Now, this might not be the exact scenario you want as we're going to run defaults, and I'll try my best to talk about some of these. It's been quite a long time since I've worked with vanilla LXD, and I don't know if I remember everything, but I'm going to do my best to research it and teach you about it as we go. All right, so with that, let's head over to my desktop here, and kind of here you can see that we have a VM over here, and it is a VM that's running, and here's the VM that's running. And you can see that we do have the QEMU guest agent running. Now, you don't need to do this, and actually, honestly, LXC or LXD is built into Proxmox, so there would be no reason to run this on Proxmox, whatever. There would be no reason to run LXD or LXC on top of Proxmox. You just use it in Proxmox. But in some scenarios, for the home lab, you might want to use LXD or LXC alongside of maybe Docker or something else on your servers, depending on how you want to set your servers up. And I do like experimenting, playing with the core technology. It teaches me a lot about what I can and can't do inside of Proxmox, and that might just be fun to play with too. So we're doing this on Proxmox because it's the easiest way for me to set up VMs, but no, you probably wouldn't run this on Proxmox. All right, so here I'm going to uncheck my hidden view on this screen so it's a little bit bigger for you guys to work with it, and the first thing I want to do is run a sudo apt update and a sudo apt grade-y to make sure my system's fully up to date. Now, I just installed this image last night, so hopefully everything's pretty up to date, which it looks like we only have a couple of updates to install. All right, so now it's time to actually install LXD itself with a sudo apt install, and the new command for installing LXD is LXD-installer, and we're going to put a -y after it. All right, so LXD is installed now, so we can run a ID command, and we can see that our user was already added to the LXD group. Now, if we had an extra user that needed to be added to the user group, or we were installing this from root or something, here on Ubuntu, we'd use the command add user, the username, which our user is VE, and then we'd put LXD. As you can see that our user is already on this group, so we can continue ahead here. And the first thing I like to do is kind of check that LXC is, or LXD, and LXD is kind of a layer over top of LXC that makes for usability of LXC a little bit better. So we can run LXC and list. And you can see that there's nothing running here at the time, but we do indeed get a fairly nice response. So we can continue along here. So it's time to set up now, kind of set up LXD so that we can begin using it. And we're going to use the command sudo LXD init. The first question, would you like to run LXD in a cluster? I don't have a need to run LXD in a cluster, so no. Would you like to configure a new storage pool? And the default's yes. I do want want to configure a storage pool. So this is going to be where all of your storage is going to happen for LXD images. And so we're going to press enter. Now it wants to know what we want to call the pool. We're going to call ours default. And at this point, they want us to use ZFS. I'm a lot more familiar and comfortable with LVM, so I'm going to enter LVM. And yes, I want to create the pool. And would you like to use any existing empty devices? My answer is no. 5 gigs is going to be fine for me. Now, notice how it's capitalized here. You want to make sure if you enter 5 GB or 5 GB like this, it's going to re-trigger it. You got to enter the number and then a capital GB, and they've actually now, it looks like, changed it to GIB. So it's capital G, lowercase I, capital B. Kind of weird. But make sure you take note of that because that can get annoying. Would you like to connect to a mass server? Default answer is no, and I'm going to answer no. Would you like to create a new local bridge? Yes, I do. So this is going to be kind of like your Proxmox VMBRs. This is going to be your bridge that's going to distribute network to your containers. Now, LXC and LXD does this a little bit different than Proxmox. Proxmox passes everything out to your local DHCP server and gives you a local address. LXC and LXD are going to do this a lot more like Docker, where they're going to create their own DHCP server, and then we're going to proxy image network connections or image ports out to the host system and then do things with them from there. So yes, we're going to call it LXD Bridge 0, and we can auto IPv4 and auto IPv6. It wants to know if we want to make this available of the network. My answer is no. We'll still be able to use our proxy and do all of that stuff when we want to, but we're not going to be able to connect over our network for a cluster or anything like that. If you were building a cluster, you'd want to use yes. But for us, it's going to be no. It's more of a secure install. So we're going to press enter, and it wants to know if we want to update images automatically. Yes, I do. And it wants to know if we want a YAML file of this configuration now. And that'll be really important if you were building a cluster and you wanted to configure every LXD system the same. And LXD and LXC is very important to have every single system configured the same. If you don't configure the same, they fail. They don't work together. So we're going to say no because this is a single system server. And now LXD is up running. So now we can search for an image, and there's many different ways we can get an image. The quickest way to find out our image is going to be LXC image list and then images, and it's going to list out all the different images that are available. Well, that can be rather hard to find what we want. As you notice, there was quite a few of them, and they come at us fairly fast. So what we can do is maybe fine-tune what we're looking for a little bit with this command by adding a pipe delimiter, and we're going to use the greep command. So we're going to go -I, and let's add Debian and see what happens. So now we got all the different Debian distros that we want to use. Now, if I remember right, we're actually able to launch an image with a little less information here. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do this. So to launch an image or to download it from the cloud, we're going to enter LXC, and then we're going to write launch images, and then the distro, which for us is going to be Debian. And if I remember right, if I didn't type this wrong, we can hit enter here, and it's going to pull down the latest version of Debian with the correct operating system for us. Let's go ahead and see if that works with the new version of LXD and see if we get any error messages. And we did. So in order to do this, we're actually going to have to put a slash in our version, and let's go ahead and do bookworm because it's right in front of us here, and then then we're going to have to put a slash and the architecture, which today we're on AMD 64. And now we're going to put a space and what we want to call it. And let's just call it my first server and hit it. Now it pulled it down and the server started. So we should be able to do an LXC list now, and we can see my first server is indeed and running. Now this is all great, but how do I interact with the server? Well, it's actually pretty easy. So we're going to run an LXC, EXEC, or exec, my first server, and we want to use bash. And now we're actually here at root for my first server. So we could do something like an apt update and apt upgrade -y, just like we would start out when we do with any other server. So now you have LXC up and running. We're able to work with servers and find our image and deploy our first image. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the other things that we can do here with LXC as far as images go. And we can run an LXC if I can type list. Oh, we're still inside the server. So we need to type exit to leave that server. And we can run LXC list again and see our one server that we created and updated. Now, if we wanted to stop this server, we could run an LXC stop, and then we're going to run the container name, my first server. Now, when we run LXC list, you can see that the container is stopped. We could also restart this container or start the container first, so we can run LXC start and my first server, and running LXC list this time will show it running and it's up and running. We could also use the same command but restart and the server will go ahead and restart. So the last thing we can do is actually delete this server, and that's going to be a two-part command because we can't delete it all it's running. So we need to run the LXC stop my first server and stop it, and then we can run LXC delete, and then running LXC list will show that we deleted the server. So we're back now to a clean container. So let's go have a little bit of fun here and see if we can install a new Ubuntu server, just like we did here a second ago, and see if we're able to see if we can get a web server up and running here, and that'll show us a little something, and then pass that through to the port on our server so that we can view it from the outside. So let's use the same LXC launch command that we used before. And I'm just pressing the up arrow right now to go through my previous commands. But I can't remember what version Bookworm is or anything else here. And it's actually Debian. We want Ubuntu. And I think Jimmy is the latest version. So let's use Jimmy here, and we're going to keep the same 64, but we're going to change the name to Ubuntu, and I think I can use a dash web server. All right, and now we can run LXC exec Ubuntu web server and bash to get to our command line, and we can run that apt update, apt upgrade -y, make sure our server is fully up and running, and then let's run an apt install and nginx, and we'll put the -y after it. All right, so now let's just run a system CTL status nginx and make sure it's up and running, and it looks like it is active and ready to run. If I remember right, nginx already has a default page and configuration inside of it, so let's go ahead and exit LXC list so we can look at everything going on here. So now we're going to need to do the proxy pass, and to configure the proxy we're going to run the command LXC config device add, and then you ubuntu web server, and then HTTP, and it's redirect proxy, and then it's listen equals TCP, and the address of our colon, and the address of our server, which is TCP 192.168.2.16168.6.6, and then it's another semicolon to denote the port, which is going to be 80, and then we're going to want to tell it where to connect. So we're going to put a space and connect equals TCP, and then it's a colon, and this time it's going to be our container's IP address, which is going to be 1051.161, and again for 80. Now, if we've done everything right, pressing enter, it should connect, and it looks like we have indeed connected here. So now on my screen capture, I can hide this. I can bring up our web browser here that right now is just handling Proxmox. We can add a new tab, and we should be able to go to 192.168.6, and there we have it. We can now see our web server that is running inside of our container here on LXC. So with that, I think that's given you a pretty good idea of how to do most of the things that you're going to want to do here, at least initially. There's a lot more we can do, just like with inside of Proxmox or Docker with containers. But I think this will give you a good point of where to start off here on May 31st of 2023 with running LXC and running LXC inside of Ubuntu 22.04. Have a good night.